I'm a member of the Cornerstone Residents Panel, and I represent Real DPO on that panel, where it's a disabled people's organisation, and I'm a member of that organisation. I've been a resident of Tower Hamlets for 20 years, and as well as being involved in the Cornerstone project, I also am involved in a number of different voluntary organisations and sort of groups within the borough.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And obviously, we're here thinking about equality impact assessment and policies and practices. So, can you tell us a bit about the situation that you realised was not okay for you and would potentially cause problems?
Yeah, so I've been at my GP practice for a number of years, and then recently I went in for an appointment and saw that they said in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to make it so all appointments have to be done online using this online system. Now, from my own experience, I find the online system really difficult to use. I'm autistic, and something about the online form is sometimes quite difficult to navigate. But I was also aware that it wasn't just me that was going to be affected by this. I've been involved through Real with a communications project, which looks at how different people with different disabilities can be communicated with. And there's a lot of issues with online forms of communication, not just for autistic and neurodiverse people, but for people with a range of disabilities. So the fact that the surgery was saying that the only way you can book an appointment will be online, I realised was going to be problematic, not just for me, but for lots of people who were disabled in the borough and at that practice.
Right, okay, thank you. So, having realised that, what were you thinking about?
So I was very aware that when you're a patient at a GP's practice, I didn't want to be seen as being difficult. I think that you really rely on a GP, particularly because of my situation, some of my disabilities. You rely on your GP to look after you. And I think there's sometimes a fear, which is not necessarily legitimate, that if you raise issues, you're going to be seen as difficult or troublesome. I was also a bit worried that they wouldn't necessarily listen to me if it was just me contacting them. They might sort of brush aside my concerns and not really think about the fact that actually this is a problem that's going to affect lots of people. I mean, not just disabled people, older people who don't have laptops. There's lots of people with language issues who would struggle with this form of booking appointments. So I felt there was a problem, but I wasn't really confident to just raise it directly. Also, the other issue is it wasn't clear even how to do that, because the receptionist didn't really seem to know a lot about it. And there wasn't an obvious email for like the practice manager or whoever I could maybe speak to. So I was a bit at a loss about how to proceed, really, and also a bit nervous about how I would do it and how it would be kind of taken if I made this sort of approach about this issue.
Okay, great. So, that's a lot. That's a lot to think about. And you said that the reception staff said contact the practice manager.
Yeah.
But obviously, you said there were various issues for you about just not wanting to be seen as difficult. So what did you do in the end?
So in a way, I was lucky because I didn't, as I say, just want to do it on my own. And I felt like I needed a bit of, I don't know, confidence or sort of reassurance that what I was worried about was a legitimate thing. Fortunately, I already knew about Real because I'm a member and because I'd been worked with some of the staff on these other projects as I was a volunteer on. So I emailed one of the staff members who I'd worked with before and explained the situation and said, am I overreacting? Am I right that this is going to be a problem? And also, asking him, well, what should I do? So that was the sort of next step that I took, which was reaching out to them to sort of get some advice and support, really.
Okay, fab. And so what happened?
So they were really helpful and reassuring. I mean, firstly, they said, this is definitely an issue and it's definitely not just an issue for you. They then said, do you want us to contact the surgery or, do you want to do it yourself? And I sort of thought it's better to come from me as a patient rather than from them, because as a surgery, they have a responsibility to me as a patient. So based on some of the sort of feedback I'd had from Real, I drafted an email explaining my concerns and why I was worried, and sort of basically saying that I felt they still needed to have some options for people that weren't an online booking. And I sent that email to the practice manager, and I also copied in the staff member from Real. Now, they then actually followed up with their own email, which was, I guess, complementary to what I'd written, because mine was very much from the perspective of a patient, but they came in and sort of reminded the practice about the Equality Act and some of their obligations in terms of having reasonable adjustments and so on. Also, importantly, I think, offered to help the practice as well. So I think none of us went in thinking this was deliberate. It felt like an oversight. The practice was trying to do something good, which was move into a modern world with bookings, but I think they just somehow not appreciated the challenges that would give to some people. So we went in, we sent those emails, and actually what was great is the practice manager came back. He was really open to what we were saying and very quickly sorted things out to try and help. So they changed all their messages to say, if you have issues with access, you can still access it in other ways. And they gave options for, contacting reception to set things up so that that was possible. Interestingly, they also offered training. And so if people wanted to use the online system but just didn't know how to, the surgery have offered that people can go in and be shown how to use the system, which I think is great as well. I mean, it was great. It couldn't have been a better response in the sense that they took it seriously, they acted on it, and they put in place something that meant that the booking system was still accessible, even as they moved across for most patients to having to do it online.
That sounds amazing.
I was really surprised. As I say, I was quite fearful beforehand that this was going to be something that made me seem to be a troublemaker, that they wouldn't be interested, that they wouldn't want to do anything about it. And in fact, that couldn't have been further from the truth. I mean, what actually happened is they took it on board. They've done something about it. And also now when I go in, the practice manager, he still talks to me about things to do with accessibility. So it's clearly also made him quite sort of keen to make sure he's doing as good a job as he can for all his patients in terms of access, which is great. And there's now a link between him and Real, which wasn't there before. So he's got a contact as well to sort of ask advice if he's got questions about things, which is really great.
That's incredible. That's a brilliant story. That's a brilliant story in terms of the outcome. Yeah, as you say, hopefully he's also then talking to other people when practice managers get together about some of these issues. So that's fantastic. So I suppose two things I think I'm curious about. So first of all, have you used the new system in terms of them having their alternative? And is that as good or smooth or easy as it was when you used to use it before?
So I've had to phone up once, I think, since then to sort something out. It's definitely not as quick a process as doing it online, but it is still there available to me as an option. And it's definitely not worse than it was before, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. And what about if you weren't in touch with Real, what do you think you would have done?
I mean, it's very difficult because actually I think there were some quite big obstacles for me in terms of contacting the practice. And I'm not someone who's a sort of seasoned disability campaigner. I've not really ever in my life had to ask for reasonable adjustments and things. So it's not something I'm super comfortable or confident about. And if Real hadn't been there, I guess my options would have been to try and do this on my own or to not do it. And I think I might have been quite likely just not to say anything and to try and use a system that I found quite difficult and stressful to use. And I think, there's people who find these things even more challenging than me, who would have been totally stuck about how to use the system. So in fact, I think it's only because of organisations like Real and also being aware that they are there and can provide support in these sorts of situations that actually I was able to do something about it.
Okay, I agree that I think lots of people, because there are obstacles, as you've described, would potentially do nothing. So that sounds amazing. Real sounds amazing as an organisation, but obviously there are also many voluntary organisations out there to give support for people in different circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. And what I like about Real, which is great, is it's run by disabled people for disabled people. I'm just a member, I have no special status, but I feel that I'm part of it. And because of the whole ethos of how it's run, there's a really well-known phrase about disability, which is nothing about us without us. And I think it's really important when dealing with these sorts of areas that the people that kind of are advocating have a deep understanding of disability through experience, because I think that it means that problems are properly recognized and also solutions that are found are really going to work. So I think that's great. And I think you're right that there are lots of other organizations for people with other kinds of protected characteristics as well. It's really important because I think often when you're on your own with these problems, you don't really feel confident. You don't necessarily have a voice. You can be quite nervous, often already because of who you are. You may be struggling in the world. You may have had bad experiences with authority, all sorts of things that actually make it harder and more difficult to advocate for yourself alone. And actually, that's when these organizations really come into their own, because they're there to give you the kind of power of a support network and the power of people who know how to advocate, who've done it before, and who can kind of help sort of you claim what are in fact your rights. Because underneath this, we all have legal rights to these things. We're supposed to have equal access. And so we're only asking for what we are entitled to, but it's often not easy to do that on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for coming and telling us your story. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks very much, Donna.
Thank you.